my project presentation over the Japanese and Chinese creationists, including some stories of their ancient culture. First, I'll start off with the Japanese creation. So basically, the Japanese believed that the earth was kind of like oil, kind of all swirled around together. And from these oils, there was three main spirits: the spirit master of the center of heaven, the august, wondrously producing spirit, and the divine, wondrously producing ancestor. And these three spirits all invisible. And from the oil, after the three deities were made, they referred to it as reeds, kind of sprouted from that and created more deities. And eventually, the grandparents of human beings, Izanagi and Izanami, created the Japanese islands by giving birth. They gave birth to Japanese islands and stuff. Eventually, the creation of humans was based off of one of Izanagi and Izanami's children, and yeah, that's how the Japanese believe they were created. Okay. Genesis versus Japanese creation. The theme for Japanese creation, I believe, is overcoming struggles, because in the beginning, when they were trying to create the island, they were having trouble, and they believed that their first two children were ugly and stuff, and they cast them aside. And eventually, they created their perfect people and the perfect babies, and so that was the struggle. And then another struggle was Izanami, the wife, died giving birth to a fire deity, and Izanagi, overcome with sadness, went to go get her, and kind of like the story of the Greek Odysseus trying to go back to get his wife. It was kind of like that, and he left without her and stuff. Izanagi compared to Adam, they both kind of populate, quote unquote, their area. Adam populates, quote unquote, the world, while Izanagi and Izanami populated Japan eventually. Chinese creation. The Chinese believe that before yin and yang were separated, that it was in one, the earth and the universe was in an eggshell kind of thing. And Pengu was a creature that was being raised inside of it, and eventually when he was born or cracked the egg, he started to push away the earth from the heaven, eventually creating yin and yang. And then after he was done, he died, and his body basically became the world and everything. Then earth, fire, wood, gold, and water emperors, elemental emperors, rose to the heavens and lived. Nuwa, which is the sister of the water emperor, basically created humans by molding clay people in their image. The theme for the creation of Chinese people and stuff is, I believe, is help others, because throughout their ancient text, the gods are always helping humans, kind of like our God helped us and guided us, and they helped us create fire, build houses, survive for themselves. Pengu and Nuwa compared to God. Pengu created the world as we know it, just like God created the world as we know it. And Nuwa created the human beings just like God created us. I believe that the overall why they made this or believed this was to explain what cannot be understood, because at the time no one really knew what was going on, and it helped them to have an understanding. Does anyone have seen the movie The 47 Ronin with Keanu Reeves? Yeah. It's completely inaccurate and everything. So basically, back in 1701, there were these two people that went to study in a governmental area, and one of the guys named Asano Takumu no Kami Naganori was very upset with his teacher and attempted to kill him. And since it was on governmental territory, he had to do an honorable suicide and basically die, leaving his samurai Ronin, which is basically masterless samurai. And most of the Ronin went off to do other things, be merchants and create swords or whatever, but 47 of the Ronins decided to plot revenge against Kira. And one of the main guys, Oshi, his name's Oshi Kuronasuke Yoshiro, he became kind of like the drunk B-word of the Ronin and was spit upon and basically just kicked around and everything in order to lead Kira off his trail, because Kira sent out spies to like watch over them to make sure they didn't reboot or take revenge on him, but eventually revenge was taken upon him, unlike the lucky one. So comparing the Ronin to Beowulf, I believe the theme is courage, because the Ronin had to have courage in order to defeat and hide from Kira in order to kill him too, and Beowulf had to have courage to defeat all his monsters and stuff. Beowulf was arrogant, unlike the Ronin / the Oshi, who were just honorable and loyal to their master and wished for revenge in order to. The Ronin compared to Gilgamesh, I believe the theme of Gilgamesh is to live and learn. Throughout time, over time, Gilgamesh is kind of, he wants to be immortal, and he's very cruel and everything in the beginning, and eventually he learns that he can't be immortal like his ancestors and such. And Gilgamesh goes from cruel to honorable throughout the story or the text, and the Ronin and / Oshi are cunning and loyal. Beowulf and the Ronin had no fear of death, because in the end of the Ronin ended up all having to commit a honorable suicide because they attacked on a governmental territory. While I believe Gilgamesh and Ronin / the Oshi are the same, because they all found peace eventually in the end. In the Chinese, I chose Ha Mulan, which is kind of like the Disney story, except she went into the army with some training. She was actually very skilled and lasted in the army for 12 years. The government offered her several high-up positions to work for them, and she refused them all, only wishing to go back to her family. I believe Beowulf and Mulan are kind of the same, because the theme is bravery. Mulan had to have a lot of bravery in order to disguise herself and last as long as she did in the army, and to take on as many people as she did during the Han Dynasty. As well as Beowulf needed bravery in order to defeat the monsters. Beowulf, again, is arrogant, and Mulan is more caring, and she just really wanted to protect her family. They both were fearless. She stood up and took on a nation, can't think of it right now, sorry. And Beowulf stood up to the monsters and such. Gilgamesh compared to Mulan, I believe, again, the theme of Gilgamesh is to live and learn, while Mulan is, once again, bravery. Gilgamesh is very cruel and goes to caring, honest, or honorable, and Mulan is, once again, caring. They both end up honorable. Interesting fact about all three of these pieces is they were once poems. And I'm done, except I have a couple videos. The John Green one goes with Japan, and helps set a background story to...
And you thought I was going to say Germany,
so
didn't you? Nope, you can fight me, Bismarck.
Yeah.
Japan had been fragmented and feudal until the late 16th century, when a series of warrior landowners managed to consolidate power. Eventually power came to the Tokugawa family, who created a military government, or bakufu. The first Tokugawa to take power was Ieyasu, who took over after the death of one of the main unifiers of Japan, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, sometimes known as the monkey, although his wife called him, and this is true, the bald rat. In 1603, Ieyasu convinced the emperor, who was something of a figurehead, to grant him the title of shogun. And for the next 260 years or so, the Tokugawa bakufu was the main government of Japan. The primary virtue of this government was not necessarily its efficiency or its forward-thinking policies, but its stability. Stability, the most underrated of governmental virtues. Let's go to the thought bubble. The Tokugawa bakufu wasn't much for centralization, as power was mainly in the hands of local lords called daimyo. One odd feature of the Tokugawa era was the presence of a class of warriors who by the 19th century had become mostly bureaucrats. You may have heard of them, the samurai. One of the things that made this hereditary class so interesting was that each samurai was entitled to an annual salary from the daimyo called a stipend. This privilege basically paid them off and assured that they didn't become restless warriors plaguing the countryside, that is, bandits. We tend to think of samurai as noble and honorable, but urban samurai, according to Andrew Gordon's book A Modern History of Japan, were a rough and tumble lot. Samurai gang wars, a West Side Story, and the shadows of Edo Castle were frequent in the early 1600s. And you still say that history books are boring. As with kings and lesser nobles anywhere, the central Bakufu had trouble controlling the more powerful daimyo, who were able to build up their own strength because of their control over local resources. This poor control also made it really difficult to collect taxes, so the Tokugawa were already a bit on the ropes when two foreign events rocked Japan. First was China's humiliating defeat in...
That was it. That's all. And I'm done. Unless you want to see one more video.
All right. What's the time on that?
10 minutes and 35
Let's
seconds.
stop right there. All right. Good job.